Hey guys, tonight we begin with a quiet tale, not of knights in shining armour or kings on golden thrones, but of a shadow flitting through the margins of history. Picture this. While Europe's nobles toasted their victories in candlelit halls, a petty thief, someone like you, was wondering if a stolen onion was worth the risk of a night in the stocks. Isn't it odd how history's grand chronicles skip over the nimble hands that kept the streets alive with their silent dance? If you enjoy this kind of thing, maybe like and subscribe, but only if you're in the mood. No hurry at all. Dim the lights. Perhaps turn on a fan or wrap yourself in a soft blanket. Settle into your favourite nook. You're about to step into the muddy, flickering world of 14th century Europe, where survival was a game of quick fingers and quicker thinking. Let's ease into the shadows together. You wake in a small market town in England, 1377, the air heavy with the scent of damp straw, wood smoke, and the faint tang of spilled ale. Your bed is a heap of straw in the attic of a tavern called the Crooked Staff, a creaky building that smells of sour beer and old secrets. The tavern keeper, Hal, a man with a face like weathered leather, lets you sleep here because you once lifted a rival's ledger and slipped it to him. It's not kindness, he's no saint, but a bargain that keeps you off the streets. The Black Death, that grim spectre, passed through a decade ago, stealing half the town's souls and leaving behind a strange, stubborn vitality. Villages stand half empty, yet the market thrums with survivors rebuilding their lives. You stretch your tunic, a patched, faded thing from someone who didn't outrun the plague, itching against your skin. Your shoes are more holes than leather, but they'll carry you through another day. They must. You're a petty thief, not a highwayman or a grand schemer. Your world is one of small triumphs, a pilfered loaf, a snatched coin, a chicken that strayed too far from its coop. It's not the stuff of legends, but it's yours. In a land where a lord's tax or a failed harvest could spell starvation, your quick hands are your only shield. You climb down the attic's ladder, each creak a reminder of how fragile your refuge is. The tavern is stirring, a few early drinkers huddled over their mugs, their voices low. You slip outside, the morning air sharp, the cobblestones slick with dew. The market square lies ahead, its stalls just waking, the hum of voices like a distant lullaby. You smile faintly, a flicker of anticipation. To the world, you're invisible. To you, the world is a lock waiting to be picked. The town is a patchwork of wood and stone, its houses leaning like tired old friends. Smoke curls from chimneys, and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer echoes. You pass a church, its bells silent now, its stone walls looming like a judge. You don't pray much, God seems busy with richer folk, but you tip your head just in case. A thief learns to hedge their bets. As you near the market, the air shifts, alive with possibility. Merchants are unpacking their wares, their shouts mingling with the cluck of hens and the creak of carts. You pause, taking it in. This is your stage, and the day's performance is about to begin. The market square is a living thing, stirring under the grey dawn like a beast shaking off sleep. You drift through it, your steps soft, your eyes scanning without lingering. A good thief doesn't stare. You learned that the hard way when a fishmonger's wife caught you eyeing her cod and chased you with a broom, her curses loud enough to wake the dead. Now you move like a breeze, unnoticed, unremarkable. The air is a tangle of scents: warm bread, rotting cabbage, the sharp bite of ale from a cracked barrel. Merchants call out, offering wool, salt, and relics of dubious origin. One man hawks a splinter of the true cross, his voice earnest. You smirk. If every splinter in Europe were real, Christ's cross would have been a forest. The faithful buy anyway, clutching their miracles, and you wonder if hope is just another kind of theft. Your target today is a baker's stall. Godwin, the baker, is a mountain of a man, his apron dusted with flour, his temper short from years of early mornings. He's arguing with a customer over a rye loaf's price, his back half turned. You edge closer, your heart steady but your fingers alive with anticipation. Timing is everything. Too early, and Godwin's eyes catch you. Too late, and the crowd thickens, making escape a tangle. You wait, patient as a spider. Godwin reaches into his basket for another loaf, and your hand moves, quick, silent, a small barley bun vanishing into your sleeve. You melt back into the crowd, your face blank, your pace a lazy stroll. The bun is warm against your arm, a small victory. It's not a feast, but it's breakfast, and breakfast is enough for now. Being a petty thief means living by unwritten rules. You don't steal from the desperate. Widows and orphans are off limits, their pain too close to your own. You take only what you need. Greed draws eyes. And you never ever steal from the church. Not because you're pious, but because the church has deeper pockets and sharper swords than any lord. A thief who lifts a candlestick from an altar might find himself praying for mercy he won't get. You nibble the bun as you walk, its crust breaking softly between your teeth. You overhear two merchants muttering about the young king, Richard II, his advisors squeezing the land dry with taxes for wars in France. You roll your eyes. Wars are for knights and fools. You just want to eat tomorrow. The market hums around you, a symphony of chaos, and you're its quietest note. You pause by a weaver's stall, pretending to admire a bolt of cloth. The weaver's apprentice, a boy with dreamy eyes, is watching a girl at the alewife's cart. You note it, filing it away. Distraction is a thief's best friend, and love is the best distraction of all. You move on, your mind already turning to the next opportunity. You slip into an alley, the bun half eaten, the market's noise fading to a murmur. The alley smells of damp stone and old rain, a familiar haven. You lean against a wall, its timbers warped by years of neglect, and check your tools. Not the kind a carpenter carries, but the quiet instruments of your trade. In your pouch, a small knife, its blade worn but sharp enough to cut a purse string or pry a loose lock. A handful of pebbles, perfect for tossing to distract a barking dog or a dozing guard. A scrap of cloth lifted from a tailor's cart, useful for wrapping a hot loaf or muffling a clinking coin. Simple things, but in your hands they're as potent as a knight's sword. Your greatest tool is your mind. You can't read Latin or tally accounts like a clerk, but you read people. You know the tanner's boy fancies the miller's daughter and lingers too long at her stall, leaving his master's cart unwatched. You know the butcher's wife counts her coins every hour, but her husband forgets his after 3 mugs of ale. These are your scriptures, written in glances and habits, more valuable than any monk's manuscript. The alley is quiet, save for a cat slinking past, a rat dangling from its jaws. You nod to it, one professional to another. Then you hear boots, heavy, deliberate. A watchman, perhaps, his lantern creaking as it swings. You press into the shadows, your breath slow, your body still. He passes, muttering about thieving rogues, but his eyes don't find you. You wait until the street is silent, then step back into the light, your heart barely stirred. Danger is just another neighbour, always close but rarely invited in. You think about your craft, how it's less about taking and more about seeing. The world is a lock, and every lock has a weakness, a distracted merchant, a loose knot, a moment of trust. You've spent years learning to spot them, to slip through the cracks others don't see. It's not pride, just truth. Without this, you'd be another beggar, or worse, a corpse. You leave the alley, the market's hum calling you back. The day is young, and there's more to be done. You pass a group of children playing with a leather ball, their laughter bright against the morning's grey. For a moment, you wonder what it's like to run without looking over your shoulder. Then you let the thought go. Wondering doesn't fill your belly. By noon, your pouch is heavier. You lifted a small coin purse from a wool merchant, too busy haggling to notice your fingers. It holds 5 pennies and a bent farthing, not a fortune, but enough for a bowl of pottage, a candle stub, and maybe a scrap of cheese for tomorrow. You're careful not to flash your gains. A thief who spends too freely might as well paint their name on the town's gallows. The risks are never far. The town's stocks sit in the square, their wood dark with shame. You've seen men and women locked there for less than you've done today, pelted with mud or rotten apples by jeering crowds. The law is a fickle beast. Steal a loaf, and you might spend a day in the stocks. Steal a silver spoon, and you'll lose a hand. A horse? Your neck snaps at the end of a rope, and no one weeps. You've dodged the worst, but not without scars. Once a tanner grabbed your wrist as you reached for an apple, his grip like iron. You twisted free, vanishing into the market's chaos, but your arm ached for days, a bruise like a shadow. Another time, a merchant's dog chased you across 3 streets, its teeth snapping at your heels until you scrambled onto a roof. You laugh now, but your pulse was a war drum then. The law isn't your only foe. The town's guilds, bakers, butchers, weavers, guard their trades like dragons. Cross them, and you're barred from buying so much as a crust. Worse are the other shadows, thieves and cutthroats who'd gut you for a penny. You work alone, trusting no one. Allies are a luxury, and luxury gets you caught. You head to the Crooked Staff, trading a penny for a bowl of pottage. Agnes, the tavern keeper's wife, a woman with eyes like a hawk, gives you a look but asks no questions. You sit in a corner, spooning up the thin stew, your gaze on the door. A thief never rests. Not really. The world is always watching, and you've learned to watch back. You think about the market's rhythm, how it ebbs and flows like a tide. Mornings are best for stealing. Merchants are busy setting up, their eyes on their wares, not their purses. Afternoons are trickier, the crowds thicker, the watchmen more alert. Evenings are for planning, for watching, for learning who trusts too much or drinks too deeply. You live by this rhythm, a silent partner in the town's dance. By afternoon, the market is still alive, but you're not stealing now. You're watching, listening, planning. A good thief knows when to strike and when to fade. You spot a new face, a spice merchant from London, his stall heavy with saffron, cloves and pepper, worth more than your life. His purse bulges, but his eyes are sharp, darting like a falcon's. You mark him for later, maybe next week when he's less wary. You live by a code, not written in ink, but carved in survival. You steal to live, not to wound. You've never drawn blood, and you pray you never will. The desperate, widows, orphans, beggars, are untouchable. Their hunger mirrors your own, a ghost from your childhood when you scrounged for scraps in alleys. The rich, though? The merchant with a dozen purses? The noble with a velvet cloak? They're fair game, their loss is a drop in their ocean. This code keeps you human, or so you tell yourself. The church calls you a sinner, but the church doesn't know the ache of an empty belly. You've seen priests feast on roast swan, while beggars claw at their gates. If God's watching, you figure he's got bigger fish to fry than a pilfered loaf. Still, you avoid the church's gold, not for salvation, but for survival. A thief who crosses the clergy doesn't live long. You give back in your way. Last winter you slipped 3 pennies into the church's alms box, not for your soul, but for a shivering boy outside, his eyes too big for his face. You were that boy once, scrounging in the cold, your fingers numb, your hope thinner than your shoes. It's not redemption, it's just balance, a way to keep the scales from tipping too far. The market hums with talk of a fair next month, a grand affair with jugglers, minstrels, and merchants from across the shire. Your pulse quickens, just a touch. Crowds mean opportunity, purses left loose, stalls left unwatched. But they also mean more watchmen, more eyes, more traps. You tuck the thought away, a seed for another day. A good thief plans, but a great thief waits. You pause by a stall selling herbs, the air thick with rosemary and thyme. The herbalist, an old woman with hands like tree roots, is chatting with a customer. You don't steal from her, she's kind to the poor, slipping them feverfew for free. You nod to her, and she nods back, her eyes sharp but not unkind. She knows what you are, but she doesn't judge. In a world of hard edges, her silence is a gift. The sun climbs higher, the market's chaos softening into a steady hum. You've added a brass pin to your haul, lifted from a tailor's store when he bent to adjust his cloth. It's small, worth little, but it glints like a star in your palm. You might trade it for a favour, a meal, a tip, a blind eye. Small things matter in your world, where a penny or a pin can tip the scales of survival. You wander the town's edges, where the streets narrow and the houses lean like tired old men. A woman washes clothes in a stream, her hands red from the cold. A blacksmith's hammer rings, steady as a heartbeat. You pause, watching a cart rumble by, its driver half asleep. Tempting, but you let it pass. Some days caution is the better theft. You think about the spice merchant again. His goods are a fortune, but fortunes come with chains. Steal too much and you're not just a thief, you're a target. The guilds, the watch, even the church would hunt you. And the other thieves, the ones with knives and no code, they'd smell your success like blood in the water. You've seen what happens to those who overreach. A thief named Watt, bold and brash, stole a silver goblet from a knight's house last year. He was drunk on his own cleverness, flashing coins in every tavern. They found him in a ditch, his throat cut, his goblet gone. You shake your head. Watt was a fool. You're not. You return to the market, blending into the crowd. A minstrel strums a lute, singing of knights and dragons, his voice sweet but thin. You listen for a moment, amused. No one sings of thieves unless it's to curse them. But you don't need songs. You have the shadows and they're enough. You notice the minstrel's purse, tied loosely at his belt, but you let it be. He's earning his bread, same as you, just with louder tools. You pass a group of merchants debating the king's taxes, their voices low but bitter. The war in France drags on, draining the land of coin and men. You don't care about France, too far, too grand. Your world is here, in the market's dust, the alley's shade, the tavern's creak. You keep moving, your eyes always searching, your mind always turning. The sun dips low, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, like a painter too weary to finish. The market is winding down, merchants packing their stalls, their voices quieter now, worn thin by the day. Your haul is modest but enough. The bun, the purse, the pin, and a small apple you lifted from a distracted farmer. You've survived another day, and in your world, that's a quiet victory. You walk back to the crooked staff, the streets emptying, the air cooling. A group of children chase a leather ball, their laughter bright against the evening's calm. You watch them, wondering for a fleeting moment what it's like to run without fear of a watchman's shout. Then you let the thought go. Wondering changes nothing, and you've learned to live with what is. In the tavern, you climb to your attic, the ladder creaking under your weight. You light your candle stub, its flame small but stubborn, casting shadows on the slanted roof. You empty your pouch, counting your gains. 5 pennies, a farthing, the pin, the apple. You tuck them into a loose floorboard, your only bank. The apple you keep out, biting into it, its tartness sharp but welcome. You lie on your straw, staring at the beams above. The day replays in your mind, a slow dance of risks and rewards. You think of tomorrow, maybe the spice merchant, maybe a quieter day. There's always a choice, even if it's small. The tavern below is silent now, the fire banked, the drinkers gone. Outside the town sleeps, save for a dog's distant bark or the creak of a shutter in the wind. You think of the fair again, its promise and peril. You imagine the crowds, the chaos, the chance to slip through like a breeze. But that's for another day. For now, you're here, in this attic, with your candle and your thoughts. You're a thief, a shadow, a survivor. And that's enough. Your candle flickers, its light fading like a tired sigh. The attic is dark, but it's a familiar dark, almost kind. You feel the weight of the day settle over you, heavy but soft, like a blanket. You've eaten, you've survived, you're still free. For a petty thief in the 14th century Europe, that's a quiet triumph. You think of the town, its rhythms and secrets. The markets hum, the alleys hush, the taverns creak. They're your world, your map, your home. You think of the people too, the baker's temper, the herbalist's kindness, the children's laughter. They're not your friends, but they're your story, woven into yours like threads in a tapestry. You think of the risks, the code, the balance. You're not a hero, not a villain, just a shadow living by your wits. The world doesn't sing your name, but it doesn't need to. You're here breathing, planning, surviving. And as you close your eyes, the 14th century fades, a dream within a dream, leaving only the soft rhythm of your breath. The tavern creaks, the wind hums, the world turns. You drift to sleep, a thief in a quiet kingdom, your heart steady, your hands still. Good night, traveller. Rest easy. You wake up in medieval Europe, sometime around 1348. The air is thick, not just with the smell of wood smoke or unwashed wool, but with something heavier, something that clings to your throat like damp cloth. It's fear, you realise, but it's quiet fear, the kind that doesn't scream but whispers. You're in a small town, maybe in Italy or France, where the cobblestones are slick with morning dew, and the church bells toll not for prayer, but for the dead. You're not just anyone, you're a plague doctor, though you don't quite know how you got here. Your robe is heavy, waxed to keep the bad air at bay, and your mask, oh, that mask, sits beside you, its beak long and curved like a crow's, with glass eyes that stare into nothing. You're told it protects you, stuffed with herbs and straw to filter the miasma, the poisoned air everyone blames for the sickness. But as you slip it over your face, it feels less like protection and more like a costume for a play no one wants to watch. The irony? You're not even a proper doctor. Most plague doctors weren't. You might have been a barber, a butcher, or just some poor soul who drew the short straw when the town needed someone, anyone, to face the plague. Real physicians, the ones with university degrees, are either dead or fled to safer cities. You, though, you stayed. Or maybe you couldn't afford to leave. Either way, here you are, tying the straps of your mask, feeling the weight of a job that's as much about theatre as it is about medicine. You step outside. The streets are quiet, too quiet, like the world's holding its breath. Houses are marked with red crosses, a warning that death has already visited. You carry a stick, not for walking but for pointing, prodding, keeping your distance from the sick. It's a strange kind of power, being the one person everyone needs but no one wants near. Is damp, and it seeps into your bones as you stand on the threshold of your first day. The town is a maze of narrow alleys, each one quieter than the last, as if sound itself fears to linger. You adjust the straps of your mask, the leather creaking like an old door, and take your first steps into the fog. Your stick taps the ground, a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat you're not sure is yours. The irony of your role hits you again as you pass a shuttered tavern. You're no scholar, no learned physician with a library of Latin texts. You might have been a tailor yesterday, or a scribe, or maybe just a wanderer who couldn't say no when the town council offered you a handful of coins and a mask. The real doctors, the ones with velvet robes and grand titles, are long gone, either dead or hiding in some lord's manor, far from the stench of the plague. You, though, are here because someone has to be. Your first stop is a weaver's house, marked by a red cross so fresh the paint still drips. The door creaks open, and a child peers out, no older than 10, her eyes wide but hollow. "Are you the bird man?" she asks, her voice barely a whisper. You nod, because that's what they call you, the bird man, the crow, the one who walks where others won't. You tell her to fetch her mother, but she shakes her head. "She's asleep," she says, and you know what that means. Sleep in this town is too often a euphemism for death. Inside, the mother lies on a straw pallet, her breath shallow, her skin blotched with the telltale marks of the plague. You kneel, careful not to touch, and prod gently with your stick. The buboes are there, angry and swollen, like unripe fruit about to burst. You murmur something about miasma, because that's what you're supposed to say, but the words feel like ash in your mouth. You sprinkle rose water from a vial, more for the child's sake than the mother's. It's theatre, all of it, but theatre is all you have. As you leave, the child clutches a rag doll, watching you go. You want to say something, anything, to make her feel less alone, but words fail you. Instead, you press a coin into her hand, though you know it won't buy her safety. The fog swallows you as you move on, the weight of your mask a little heavier now. The Black Death isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets or armies. It creeps. You see it in the faces of the townsfolk, pale, hollow, their eyes darting as if they can spot the invisible killer. They call it the pestilence, the great mortality, or just it. By now, maybe half the town is gone. The numbers are hard to pin down. History will argue over them for centuries, but you feel the emptiness. Shops are shuttered. Fields lie fallow. Even the dogs seem to know better than to bark. You walk to your first patient of the day, your boots scuffing against the dirt. The plague has a signature. Swollen lymph nodes called buboes, black patches on the skin, a fever that burns like a furnace. You've heard the stories. People healthy at breakfast, dead by supper. The lucky ones last a week. The unlucky ones, well, you try not to think about them. Your patient is a baker's wife, lying in a dark room that smells of sweat and despair. Her husband hovers at the door, wringing his hands. You don't touch her. Touching is dangerous, and besides, your stick is long enough to lift the blanket. Her neck is swollen, the buboes like grotesque ornaments. You murmur something about balancing humours because that's what people expect. The truth? You have no idea what's causing this. No one does. Germs won't be discovered for another 500 years. All you have is the miasma theory, the idea that bad air spreads the disease. It's why your mask is stuffed with lavender and mint, why you burn rosemary in the streets. It smells nice at least. You try a treatment, lancing the buboes to drain the poison, applying a poultice of onions and herbs. It's what the books say to do, though the books are mostly guesswork. You tell the husband to pray. He nods, but his eyes say he's already given up. As you leave, you hear him whisper a prayer, not for his wife, but for himself. You don't blame him. Selfishness is just survival in a world like this, carries a rhythm of its own, a slow, relentless pulse that you feel in the soles of your boots. The town is a ghost of itself, its heartbeat fading. You pass a market square where stalls stand abandoned, their awnings sagging like tired eyelids. A single apple rolls across the cobblestones, untouched, as if even thieves have fled. The silence is oppressive, broken only by the occasional cough from a shuttered window or the creak of a cart hauling bodies to the pits outside town. Your next patient is an old man, a tanner by trade, his hands still stained from years of working leather. He's propped against a wall, his eyes glassy but defiant. "I've seen wars," he tells you, his voice a rasp. "This is worse." You nod, because what else can you do? You check his pulse, slow and thready, and apply a poultice of crushed garlic and rue. It smells like a kitchen gone wrong, but the books swear by it. The tanner scoffs. "You think that'll save me?" he asks, and you don't answer, because you don't know. As you work, he tells you stories of the town before the plague, how the market buzzed with traders, how the church was packed on Sundays, how children laughed instead of hid. You listen, because listening is part of the job, maybe the only part that matters. He coughs, a wet, ugly sound, and you step back, your stick raised like a shield. He laughs, a dry chuckle. "You're as scared as I am," he says, and you don't deny it. Outside you meet a woman carrying a basket of wilted herbs. She's a healer, or so she claims, selling charms and potions to anyone desperate enough to buy. "The plague's in the stars," she whispers, pressing a sachet of dried lavender into your hand. "Wear this, Birdman, or you'll be next." You take it, not because you believe her, but because it's easier than arguing. The sachet smells faintly of hope, and you tuck it into your robe, wondering if hope is just another kind of miasma. The day stretches on, each house a variation on the same theme: fear, sickness, resignation. You see a merchant, his ledger forgotten, his fingers blackening at the tips. You see a young mother, her baby silent in a cradle that hasn't rocked in days. You see a boy, no older than the tanner's grandson, trying to dig a grave for his father in a backyard too small for the task. You offer to help, but he waves you away, his eyes hard. "You can't fix this," he says, and you know he's right. By dusk, your robe is damp with sweat and fog, your mask stifling. You pause by a stream, tempted to dip your hands in the water, but you don't. The stream might carry the plague, or so the townsfolk say. You settle for wiping your hands on a rag, the motion mechanical, like a prayer you've forgotten the words to. The plague's march continues, and you march with it, one step at a time, into the gathering dark. Back in your lodgings, you unpack your bag. It's a small arsenal of oddities, each item more absurd than the last when you think about it. There's the vial of theriac, a cure-all potion made from viper flesh, opium, and about 70 other ingredients no one can quite agree on. It's expensive, tastes awful, and probably does nothing, but people swear by it. You've got leeches because bleeding is supposed to help, though you've noticed it mostly makes patients weaker. There's a jar of crushed emeralds. Yes, emeralds, because some alchemist swore gemstones could ward off disease. You tried it once. The patient died, but they died sparkling, so there's that. Your mask is the star of the show, though. Designed by a French physician named Charles Delorme, it's supposed to make you look like a bird of prey, scaring off the plague like a hawk scares off sparrows. The logic is shaky, but the look is unforgettable. You wonder if it's less about science and more about giving people something to believe in. Hope is a powerful drug, even if it's just a placebo. The funniest part? You're paid in pennies, promises, or sometimes just a loaf of bread. Plague doctors aren't exactly rolling in gold. The town council hired you because you were cheap, not because you were good. And yet, every morning, you put on the mask, grab your stick, and head out into the fog. Why? Maybe it's duty, maybe it's stubbornness, or maybe it's just that you don't know what else to do. Are spread across a rickety table in your lodgings a collection of oddities that belong in a curiosity shop, not a doctor's kit. You run your fingers over them, half expecting them to vanish like a dream. There's a small brass lancet, its edge dulled from overuse, for piercing buboes in a ritual that feels more like sacrifice than medicine. There's a clay jar of rose petals, crushed into a paste that's supposed to draw out the poison, but mostly just stains your gloves. And then there's the theriac, that murky elixir in its chipped vial, its recipe a mystery even to you. You've heard it contains everything from myrrh to snake venom, a potion so complex it's practically alchemy. You tried it on yourself once, just a sip, and spent the night retching. If it's a cure, it's a cruel one. You pick up a bundle of dried wormwood, its scent sharp enough to cut through the fog in your head. The townsfolk believe it purifies the air, so you burn it in a small brazier, watching the smoke curl like a ghost. It's a ritual, like so much of your work, less about science and more about giving people something to cling to. You wonder if the wormwood's real purpose is to mask the smell of death, which clings to everything now, like damp on stone. Your stick leaning against the wall is more than a tool. It's a barrier, a way to keep the world at arm's length. You've learned to wield it with precision, lifting blankets, turning bodies, even nudging a stray dog away from a corpse. It's strange how a piece of wood can become an extension of yourself, as familiar as your own hand. You carved your initials into it one night, a small act of defiance against the anonymity of the mask. No one will ever see it, but it's yours. The mask itself sits on the table, its glass eyes catching the flicker of your candle. You've started to hate it, the way it muffles your voice, the way it makes your breath hot and stale. But you can't work without it. The herbs inside, cloves, mint, a scrap of camphor, are supposed to protect you, but they're starting to smell sour, like fruit left too long in the sun. You wonder if you should replace them, but the apothecary's prices are steep and your purse is light. Besides, you're not sure the herbs do anything at all. Maybe the mask's real power is in its terror, keeping people at a distance so you don't have to see their fear up close. You pack your bag, each item a reminder of how little you know. There's a small book, its pages brittle, filled with remedies you barely understand. Latin phrases, diagrams of the stars, instructions for bleeding a patient under the right moon. You've tried to read it, but the words swim and you're too tired to care. You close the book, wondering if knowledge is just another mask, one you wear to fool yourself. Not everyone you meet is sick. Some are just scared, and fear makes people do strange things. There's the priest who insists the plague is God's punishment, preaching to empty pews because no one dares gather. He begs you to join him in a procession, waving incense and chanting psalms. You decline. Crowds are a death sentence, but you admire his grit, even if it's misplaced. Then there's the apothecary, a wiry man with a grin like a fox. He sells you potions and powders, each one pricier than the last. This one's got unicorn horn, he says, winking. You're pretty sure it's chalk, but you buy it anyway. Patients like the idea of magic, and you're not above a little showmanship. The apothecary's doing better than most. Fear is good for business. The strangest are the flagellants. You see them one afternoon, a group of men whipping themselves bloody in the town square, shouting that the plague will end if they suffer enough. Their logic is as twisted as their backs, but you can't look away. Pain, at least, is something they can control. Unlike the plague, you try to avoid the gravediggers. They're a grim bunch, and not just because of their job. They've seen too much, buried too many. One of them, a boy no older than 16, tells you he buries whole families now, no questions asked. You give him a coin and move on. You don't want to hear more. Are a tapestry of desperation and defiance, each one a thread in the unravelling fabric of the town. You meet them in doorways, in alleys, in the flickering light of candles that burn too low. There's the widow who greets you with a cup of weak ale, her hands trembling as she points to her son, curled up in a corner. He's not sick yet, she says, but she sees the plague in his eyes. You examine him, your stick hovering over his thin frame, and find no signs of the disease. You tell her to keep him warm, to pray, but you know she's already praying, and it hasn't helped. She presses the cup into your hands as you leave, a payment you can't refuse, though the ale tastes of ash. Then there's the innkeeper, a barrel of a man who's somehow still open for business, serving watered-down wine to the few travellers brave or foolish enough to pass through. He calls you over one evening, offering a stool and a story. Used to be, this place was alive, he says, gesturing to the empty tables. Now it's just me and the ghosts. He laughs, but it's a hollow sound like wind through a broken window. He asks if you've tried praying to Saint Roch, the patron of plague victims. You haven't, but you nod, because it's easier than explaining that saints feel as distant as cures. You encounter a group of children one afternoon playing a game that chills you. They've tied rags to sticks, pretending to be plague doctors, poking at an imaginary patient, a pile of straw with a face drawn in charcoal. You're dead, one shouts, and they all laugh, but their laughter is brittle, like glass about to shatter. You watch from a distance, your mask hiding your expression, and wonder what it means to grow up in a world where death is a game. The most unsettling is the gravedigger's wife, a woman with eyes like storm clouds. She finds you in the churchyard, where you've come to deliver a poultice to the sexton. You're wasting your time, she says, her voice flat. They're all dead by now. You start to argue, but she points to the fresh mounds of earth, too many to count. She tells you she's buried her husband, her brother, and 2 of her children, and she's still digging. You offer her a sachet of herbs, but she shakes her head. Keep it, she says. You'll need it more than me. You walk away, her words heavy in your pocket, heavier than the herbs. Days turn into weeks, and the mask feels heavier. Not physically, but in the way it changes you. People don't see you as a person anymore, just a symbol. To the healthy, you're a saviour, or at least a convenient scapegoat. To the sick, you're a spectre, the last face they'll see before the end. You try to be kind, to offer words of comfort, but words feel hollow when you know the truth. Most of your patients will die. You start to notice things. The way your hands shake when you lance a bubo, the way you avoid mirrors because you don't want to see the fear in your own eyes, the way you've stopped dreaming because sleep is just a brief escape from the endless parade of death. One night, you sit by a fire, your mask off for once. The herbs inside it are starting to rot, and you wonder if they ever did anything at all. You think about the people you've lost, not just patients but friends, neighbours, maybe even family. History will call this the Black Death, a name that sounds dramatic but doesn't capture the quiet horror of it all. It's not the dying that gets to you, it's the living, the carrying on, the pretending you can make a difference. Grows with every step you take. It's not just the leather, the straps, the stifling heat. It's the way the mask changes how the world sees you. You're no longer a person, but a figure, a shadow with a beak, something halfway between man and myth. You catch your reflection in a puddle one evening, the glass eyes glinting like coins, and you barely recognize yourself. Who is this creature, you wonder, and how did it become you? The townsfolk treat you differently now. The healthy keep their distance, crossing themselves when you pass, as if you're the plague itself. The sick reach for you, their hands trembling, their voices pleading for a miracle you can't give. You've learned to speak softly, to move slowly, because anything else feels like cruelty. But the softness is a mask too, hiding the fear that gnaws at you, the fear that you're not enough. And now you're back. The 14th century fades like a painting left in the rain, and you're in your own bed, the hum of the fan pulling you back to the present. The plague doctor's world is gone, but its echoes linger. The courage, the absurdity, the quiet horror of trying to outrun death. History is full of these stories, tucked away like old letters in a drawer, waiting for someone to open them. To your own time, the 14th century slipping away like a dream you can't quite hold. The fan hums, the night wraps around you, and the plague doctor's world fades to a whisper. But it's left something behind, a sense of resilience, of quiet strength, of the strange beauty in surviving the unsurvivable. You've walked in the birdman's shoes, felt the weight of his mask, carried his fears and his fleeting hopes. History doesn't forget people like him, even if it buries their names. You pull the blanket closer, the fan's breeze cool against your skin. The past is a vast, quiet place, full of stories like this one, waiting for you to find them. If you like this journey, maybe leave a like or subscribe for more, but only if you want to. For now, just rest. The past will still be there tomorrow, ready to whisper another story when you're ready to listen. Good night. You wake up in medieval Europe, sometime around the 13th century. The air smells of wood smoke, damp straw, and something faintly sour, maybe last night's stew. Your bed, if you can call it that, is a lumpy sack stuffed with barley husks, tucked into the corner of a one-room cottage. A rooster crows outside, though it's barely dawn, and you suspect it's just showing off. You stretch, your joints creaking like the wooden beams above you, and notice something curious. A small bundle of dried herbs hangs over the doorway. It's not for cooking. It's to keep the fairies from sneaking in at night. You step outside, your bare feet sinking into the cool mud of the village path. The hamlet is small, maybe 20 houses, all huddled together like nervous sheep. Smoke curls from chimneys, and somewhere nearby, a cow lows mournfully. The villagers are already stirring, but no one moves quickly. Life here is slow, deliberate, as if rushing might offend the spirits that linger in the mist. You notice a woman across the way, scattering salt around her doorstep. She mutters something under her breath, and you catch the word protection. Salt, you learn, isn't just for soup. It's a barrier against evil. Spill it and you've invited bad luck. She glances at you, nods, and goes back to her task. You don't ask questions. Not yet. You're new here, and you're starting to sense that every action in this village is governed by rules you don't understand. Rules born of superstition, woven into the fabric of survival. As you wander toward the village square, a patch of trampled earth surrounded by a blacksmith's forge, a tiny church, and a well, you hear a rhythmic clanging. The blacksmith is at work, but he's not just making horseshoes. He's hammering iron nails into a wooden beam above his door. Iron, you're told later, repels witches. And witches apparently are a bigger problem than rusty ploughs. You smile at the thought that the blacksmith doesn't. His face is grim, as if he's just seen something you haven't. The village is alive with these small rituals. A man ties a red ribbon around his cow's tail to protect her milk from being stolen by elves. A child carefully steps over a crack in the path, whispering that it's a fairy's trap. Even the well has its own superstition. You must never draw water after midnight, or you'll pull up a bucket full of curses. You're tempted to laugh, but the weight of their belief stops you. These people aren't joking. To them, the world is a tapestry of seen and unseen forces, and superstition is the thread that holds it together. You pause by the well, peering into its dark depths. The water is still, reflecting the grey sky above. A young boy approaches carrying a wooden bucket, and he eyes you warily. "Don't look too long," he says. "The water spirits don't like it." You nod, stepping back, and he relaxes. You wonder how many spirits live in this village. Fairies, witches, water creatures. It's crowded in a way you never imagined. You sit on a wooden bench near the church, nibbling a piece of coarse bread someone handed you. It's chewy, flecked with bits of grit from the millstone, but you're hungry, so you don't complain. A group of villagers gathers nearby, murmuring about a neighbour's cow that stopped giving milk. "It's the evil eye," one says, and the others nod solemnly. You lean closer, curious. The evil eye, it seems, is a curse cast by a jealous glance. Maybe someone admired the cow too much, or maybe they didn't. Either way, the solution is clear. The cow's owner must tie a charm, a hagstone, a rock with a natural hole in it, around the animal's neck. Problem solved. Or so they hope. You start to notice the sheer number of rules governing this world. They're not written down, of course. Most villagers can't read, but they're passed along in whispers, songs, and stern warnings. Sneeze, and you must say a prayer to keep the devil from slipping into your soul. Spill milk, and you'd better toss a pinch of it into the fire as an offering to the household spirits. If you hear an owl hoot at night, don't look outside. Owls, you're told, are messengers of death, and meeting their gaze invites it closer. Some rules are oddly specific. You learn never to cut your nails after sunset, lest the clippings fall into the hands of a witch. Never leave a cradle empty, or fairies will steal the next baby and leave a changeling in its place. And whatever you do, don't walk widdershins counterclockwise around the church. Why? No one's entirely sure, but it's bad luck, and that's enough. You find the logic slippery. It's not that the villagers are irrational, they're practical in their way. They know the world is unpredictable. Crops fail, babies die, storms ruin harvests. Superstition gives them a sense of control. If you tie a charm to your cow or scatter salt on your doorstep, you've done something. You've fought back against the chaos. And if it doesn't work, well, you must have missed a step. Or maybe the spirits were just too strong that day. You finish your bread and notice a small girl watching you. She's holding a braided cord of straw, knotted in a peculiar pattern. "For luck," she says, and hands it to you before running off. You tuck it into your pocket, not because you believe in luck, but because her earnestness makes it hard to say no. You're starting to understand. Superstition isn't just fear, it's hope, dressed in strange clothes. As you wander back through the village, you notice other charms. A horseshoe nailed above a door points up to trap good fortune. A sprig of rosemary tucked into a woman's apron to ward off nightmares. A man spits over his shoulder after mentioning a neighbour who died last winter to keep death from lingering. These rituals are small, but they're constant, like breathing. You try to count them, but there are too many. It's as if the village is a living spell, cast and recast every day. As the sun climbs higher, you follow a path out of the village, toward the fields. The land is patchwork, strips of barley, rye, and oats, divided by low stone walls. A few villagers are at work, hoeing weeds or checking for signs of blight. They move slowly, not out of laziness, but because every task has its rituals. Before planting, they bury a coin in the soil to appease the land spirits. Before harvesting, they leave the last sheaf of grain standing as an offering to the field's guardian. You wonder how much of their crop goes to these unseen beings. Probably more than they can afford. The path leads you to a small grove of trees where the air feels cooler, heavier. A villager walking nearby crosses himself and quickens his pace. "Fairy ring," he mutters, pointing to a circle of mushrooms at the edge of the grove. You look closer and see it, a perfect ring of toadstools, bright against the grass. To you, it's just fungi. To him, it's a doorway to another world. "Step inside," he warns, "and the fairies might take you." You'll return years later, unchanged, while everyone you know has grown old or died. Or maybe you won't return at all. Fairies, you learn, aren't the twinkling sprites of modern stories. They're capricious, dangerous, and deeply territorial. They steal milk, snatch babies, and sour ale just for spite. Every village has its fairy tales, not the cozy kind, but the kind that make you check the locks twice. You hear about a local farmer who offended the fairies by cutting down a hawthorn tree, their sacred plant. His crops failed, his cows sickened, and his wife miscarried. Coincidence? Maybe. But no one in the village thinks so. You sit under an oak tree, away from the fairy ring, and watch the clouds drift. The villagers' fear of fairies strikes you as oddly practical. They don't waste energy fighting what they can't see. Instead, they negotiate. They leave offerings, bread, milk, a shiny trinket, at the edge of the woods. They avoid certain places like this grove, or certain times like Midsummer's Eve. It's a kind of diplomacy, a treaty with the unseen. You think about the offerings left for fairies. A crust of bread here, a saucer of milk there. It's not much, but in a village where hunger is a constant shadow, it's a sacrifice. You wonder what it's like to give up food you can't spare, just to keep peace with creatures you've never seen. It's faith of a sort. Or maybe it's insurance. Either way, it's woven into the rhythm of the day. As you head back toward the village, you pass a woman kneeling by a stream, washing clothes. She's careful not to let the water touch her hands directly, using a stick to stir the linens. "The stream spirits," she explains when you ask. "They'll pull you in if you're not careful." You nod, though you're not sure you believe her. But then you notice the way she glances at the water, as if expecting something to rise from it. Her fear is real, and that's enough to make you step back from the bank. Back in the village, the day is winding down. The sky is bruise-coloured, promising rain, and the villagers are hurrying their chores. You help an old woman carry a basket of turnips, and she tells you about the latest village drama. A neighbour, a widow named Marjorie, is suspected of witchcraft. It started when a child fell ill, and someone remembered Marjorie muttering something odd near the child's house. Then a loaf of bread baked in her oven came out with a strange mark, like a claw. Now people avoid her, crossing themselves when she passes by. You're sceptical, but the old woman's tone is matter of fact. "Witches," she says, "are real. They curse crops, sicken livestock, and sour milk. They fly at night to meet the devil, riding broomsticks or even pigs." You bite your lip to keep from smiling at the image, but you nod gravely. You've heard about witch hunts, but here, in this moment, it's not a historical event. It's a quiet, insidious fear that seeps into every unexplained misfortune. You learn that Marjorie's biggest mistake was being inconvenient. She's old, childless, and lives alone. She's sharp-tongued and doesn't bother flattering the village's more powerful families. In a world where community is survival, being different is dangerous. It's a crack in the village's armour, a place for bad luck to slip through. Superstition fills that crack with accusations. The villagers aren't cruel, not exactly. They're scared. A sick child, a failed crop, a sudden death. It's easier to blame a witch than to accept that sometimes bad things just happen. So they watch each other, looking for signs. A strange word, a glance too long, a cat that's too familiar. Anything can be evidence, because the fear of witches is evidence enough. You pass by Marjorie's cottage. its door tightly shut. A small crowd lingers nearby, whispering. Someone has tied a bundle of rowan branches to a nearby fence post, a ward against her supposed magic. You feel a pang of unease, not because you believe in witches, but because you see how belief can twist justice into something brittle and cruel. You sit by the village well again, watching the crowd disperse. The boy from earlier is back, drawing water for his family. He tells you about another witch, long ago, who was driven out of the village after a storm ruined the harvest. She cursed the fields, he says, his eyes wide. That's why we still leave offerings at the crossroads. You nod, though you suspect the offerings have more to do with habit than history. Superstition, you realize, is a story that grows with every telling. Night falls, and you're invited to join the villagers at the church for evening prayers. The building is small, its walls painted with faded images of saints and demons. The air smells of wax and incense, and the priest, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, leads the congregation in a low chant. You sit in the back, your straw charm still in your pocket, feeling like an imposter, but oddly comforted by the ritual. The church, you realize, is both a refuge from superstition and its amplifier. The priest preaches against pagan beliefs, fairy offerings, witch charms, the evil eye. But the villagers blend his words with their own. They pray to Saint Bridget for protection, but they still leave a saucer of milk for the household spirits. They wear crosses, but they also carry hagstones. It's not hypocrisy, it's syncretism, a patchwork faith that makes sense in a world of uncertainty. After prayers, you step outside and look up at the stars. They're brighter here than you've ever seen, a glittering map above the dark village. A villager beside you points out constellations, but they're not called Orion or Ursa Major. They're the Plough, the Reaper, the Witch's Wheel, names tied to their lives on Earth. He tells you the stars guide souls to heaven, but also warn of omens. A falling star means death. A comet means war. You nod, wondering how many wars they've seen and how many stars they've blamed. You sit on a hill overlooking the village, the air cool and sharp. The cottages are dark now, save for the faint glow of hearth fires. Somewhere a dog barks, then falls quiet. You think about the day, the salt on the doorstep, the iron nails, the fairy ring, the whispers about Marjorie. It's a strange world, alive with belief, where every action is a spell, every moment a negotiation with the unseen. The villager beside you tells you about a local legend, a star that fell to Earth long ago, landing in a nearby meadow. The villagers built a shrine there, leaving offerings to keep the star's spirit happy. You ask if anyone's seen the shrine, and he shakes his head. Too dangerous, he says. The fairies guard it now. You smile, but you don't argue. In this world, fairies are as real as the stars and just as untouchable. You return to the cottage where you woke this morning, welcomed by the family who lives there. They're kind, though cautious, offering you a bowl of thin porridge flavoured with herbs. You sit by the hearth, the fire crackling softly, and notice a small wooden figure on the mantel, a crude carving of a man with a wide hat. The house spirit, the mother explains, seeing your glance. He keeps the fire burning and the mice away. You learn that every home has its spirit, a guardian of sorts, but also a bit of a nuisance. Forget to leave a bit of bread by the hearth, and the spirit might tip over a pot or tangle your wool. The family treats it like a fussy guest, always mindful of its presence. You find the idea charming, but also exhausting. How do they keep track of all these rules? Fairies, witches, stars, and now house spirits. The father tells you about a time he forgot the offering. The next day, the fire wouldn't light, and a hen went missing. He left a whole loaf of bread that night, and things returned to normal. You don't argue with the spirits, he says, shrugging. You nod, stirring your porridge, and wonder how much bread this village has fed to the unseen. As the fire dies down, the mother sweeps the hearth, careful to scatter the ashes in a specific pattern. For protection, she says, and you don't ask what from. You're starting to see the pattern yourself. Every task, no matter how small, is a ritual. Sweeping, cooking, spinning wool. It's all a dance with the invisible. You try to imagine living this way, every action weighted with meaning. It's dizzying, but also oddly comforting. There's a rhythm to it, a kind of poetry. You help clear the table, and the mother hands you a small cloth sachet filled with dried lavender. For your dreams, she says, keeps the night hags away. You thank her, tucking it under your pillow later. You don't believe in night hags, but the lavender smells nice, and you're not about to tempt fate. The next morning, you wake to the sound of rain pattering on the thatched roof. The village is quieter today, the paths slick with mud. You borrow a cloak from the family and set out to explore, drawn to a crossroads just beyond the village. It's marked by a weathered stone, carved with a cross, and surrounded by small offerings, coins, flowers, a bit of bread wrapped in cloth. You pause, remembering the boy's story about the witch's curse. A man approaches, leading a donkey laden with sacks of grain. He's a peddler, passing through on his way to the next village. He greets you warmly, but his eyes linger on the crossroads. Never linger here at night, he says. It's where the spirits meet. You ask what kind, and he lists them. Ghosts, demons, fairies, even the souls of the unbaptized. The crossroads, he explains, is a liminal place, neither here nor there, and liminal places are dangerous. He tells you about a traveller who ignored the warning and slept at a crossroads. The next morning, he was gone, leaving only his cloak behind. The villagers say he was taken by the fairies, or maybe the devil. You nod, though you suspect he just wandered off. But the peddler's voice is earnest, and you don't argue. Superstition, you're learning, is as much about storytelling as it is about belief. The peddler shares his breakfast, a piece of cheese and an apple, and you sit under a tree to eat, the rain dripping softly around you. He tells you more stories. A village where a black dog guards a buried treasure, a well that grants wishes but steals your shadow, a miller who outwitted a fairy and paid for it with his luck. Each tale is laced with superstition, a warning wrapped in a riddle. You listen, half dozing, the rain a gentle lullaby. Before he leaves, the peddler hands you a small iron charm shaped like a key. For protection, he says. You thank him, adding it to your growing collection. Straw cord, lavender sachet, and now this. You're starting to feel like a walking talisman, armoured against a world you don't quite understand. By evening, the rain has stopped and the village is preparing for a festival, St. John's Eve, a celebration of midsummer. You follow the villagers to a field outside the hamlet where a bonfire is being built. The air is filled with laughter and the smell of roasting meat, but there's an undercurrent of caution. Midsummer, you learn, is a dangerous time when the veil between worlds is thin. The bonfire is lit, its flames leaping high, and the villagers circle it, tossing herbs into the fire. The smoke smells sharp, like sage and rosemary, and someone explains it keeps evil spirits at bay. You join the circle, feeling the heat on your face, and notice the villagers' careful steps. They move clockwise, never widdershins, and they avoid stepping on the fire's shadow. You mimic them, not wanting to stand out. A fiddler plays a slow tune, and the villagers dance, their movements deliberate, almost ritualistic. You're pulled into the dance, stumbling a bit but guided by a young woman who laughs at your clumsiness. She tells you the dance is an offering to the saints, but also to the older spirits of the land. We keep everyone happy, she says, and you smile at the pragmatism. Later, you sit by the fire, watching sparks drift into the sky. The villagers tell stories of saints who battled demons, of fairies who blessed or cursed, of witches burned long ago. Each tale is a thread in the village's tapestry, a way of making sense of the world. You listen, your eyes heavy, and realize you're starting to believe, not in fairies or witches, but in the power of these stories to hold a community together. As the fire dies down, the villagers leap over the embers, a ritual for luck and protection. You hesitate, then jump, feeling a childish thrill. The crowd cheers and you laugh, caught up in the moment. Maybe there's something to this, you think. Not magic, but meaning. You return to the cottage, the village now cloaked in silence. You lie down on your straw bed, the barley husks rustling beneath you, and pull the woolen blanket close. The herb bundle over the doorway sways slightly, as if bidding you good night. You close your eyes, and as you drift off, you hear the village's heartbeat, the slow, steady rhythm of a world shaped by superstition. These beliefs, you realize, aren't so different from your own modern habits. You might not scatter salt or fear fairies, but you knock on wood, cross your fingers, or avoid jinxes. The medieval villagers aren't so strange after all. They're trying to make sense of a world that's unpredictable, just as you are. Their superstitions are their stories, their shield against the dark. The rooster crows in the distance, but you're too sleepy to care. You're sinking deeper, the village fading into mist. Maybe tomorrow you'll learn more about Marjorie's fate, the fairy ring's secrets, or the star's omens. But for now, you rest, cradled by the quiet, strange magic of this forgotten world. Good night.